Hey, what's going on? This is the Saturday Down South podcast. I am Connor O'Gara. Will, I love this silly sport, man. I just love it. I love it. Chef's kiss of a day. I wasn't feeling particularly great, and I'm not saying that I'm at 100% right now. We got kind of sickness going through the house a little bit. It wasn't just one of those it was like a food coma. I don't really know how to describe it, but I just wasn't hungry all day yesterday, and I'm not sure if a stomach bug is trying to get to me or what, but I think college football made me feel a whole lot better because that was just a whale of a day that we get to discuss today.
I think that was the best Saturday I've ever seen in the SEC.
It's certainly up there. I'd have to really go through 2014, probably had some of those Saturdays. The Katy Perry Saturday. I can't remember, there were other things that were going on that day that made me think, oh, it's not just Bama, Ole Miss. There are other things. It's like A&M LSU that day or something.
Let's not worry about that.
Okay, let's not worry about that. But it was awesome. It was absolutely awesome.
On a day in which start to finish, starting with Kentucky Ole Miss at noon, which was the biggest win since the Jimmy Carter administration. One of our listeners let us know.
Oh, not the last mention of that. Shout out our guy Gary Joe Collins, but not the last mention of Jimmy Carter on this here podcast. I can assure you of that.
Yeah, but starting with that, going through to that just instant classic with Georgia-Bama, which was obviously we'll get to that too. I feel like I was on drugs the entire Saturday. I feel like I couldn't look away from my television. We were just talking off air about A&M, Arkansas, and Auburn, Oklahoma are at the same time, and I'm every second of both of these games is good. I need 4 eyes.
I know it was a great day for the multi-view on YouTube for that afternoon slate, and I very much took advantage of that. But yeah, this is exactly the type of Saturday that when ESPN and ABC agreed to this deal with the SEC, they said, buddy, just give us this. If we can set up days like this where you don't have to leave this channel and you can be on ABC or ESPN throughout the entire day and we just have wall-to-wall action in this new 16-team conference, we're going to be good. And that was that. I can't remember who it was. Who was it who tweeted this out? But somebody was like, can you imagine CBS right now, how they feel watching this and realizing how good this action was? I mean, it was fantastic. It absolutely was. And obviously CBS would only be having the 3:30, but this could have been a candidate for the doubleheader, the 2 CBS doubleheaders that we get in the year, but nonetheless, just an absolutely awesome day. Real quick before we get going, I said sick household before, so if you hear a crying baby in the background, a little bit of grace. It's been a little bit of a difficult 24 hours with Claire being sick, but we're powering through. So let's get into it, Will. Let's get into it. We're starting with Georgia and Bama. Game of the year, and that feels like it's putting it lightly. Just quite simply one of the best regular season games that you will ever see. I mean, I'm still buzzing off of what we saw. I even went back and I watched the highlights because I like to watch SEC final as I'm putting together notes and stuff like that. I'm finishing up my stories for SDS. And up until Xavier Brown intercepted that ball, I was like, are we about to get 7 overtimes? This is 41-30. It was 41-34. And you're thinking, oh my gosh, what if these teams just keep having this heavyweight fight? And Georgia's wild comeback bid ultimately comes up short after they fall behind 28-0 in this game. But it was just pure cinema. It really was. And I'm so glad, so glad that this game lived up to the hype. Because while I am not one of those people at all that is like college football is better when Team X is good, I am one of those people that says college football is awesome when top 5 matchups feel like top 5 matchups. This felt, after that first half, this felt like a matchup of top 5 teams who could be facing off again, of course. And if we see this matchup play out again, either in the SEC championship, which is still going to be difficult for Georgia to be able to navigate that path, and if we see it play out again in the playoff, I don't think anybody would be surprised. It was incredible, just absolutely incredible.
Yeah, I mean, this was exactly what we'd hoped for out of this Alabama offense with Jalen Milroe, right? I mean, Jalen Milroe is such a fun player that has, I think, kind of been locked in a little bit of a prison by, Bill O'Brien, by Tommy Rees, and seeing him play within himself, seeing the design runs that made sense, that were not just like scrambles and scared, like, oh, this play doesn't, I can't, like this play it's a disaster. I'm going to get out of here is kind of what he did last year. Now it's like, oh, feels like every play you have to defend sideline to sideline from the jump. Feels like they've completely keyed into, okay, we're going to do a little bit of trickeration in the backfield, keep the defense going like east-west, and then boom, Jalen Milroe has this arm. And Ryan Williams, my God,
we're gonna get to Ryan. Yeah. Let's start with the Bama stuff because you
so
led right into it.
I love this game, man.
There's a lot to break down, a lot of takeaways from this game. You're right. Like any question I think about Jalen Milroe's fit in the Kalen DeBoer offense looked like they were answered emphatically in the first half. And even at the end, of course, when they're able to have the touchdown, the game-winning touchdowns to Ryan Williams.
And that's the other part of that Jalen Williams. Not Jalen Williams, Jalen Milroe. He has always had that dog in him. Like he gets better in big moments. So we got to see both. Yeah.
We really did. I mean, he showed up in that first half like there was just nobody on this earth that could have gotten in his way. Absolutely nobody. Everything he did had this amount of poise and aggression that, like, I don't care who you are. If you are a fan of football, you will show that to quarterbacks and say, this is how you show up for a big time game like that, because he was disciplined. He didn't force the action. Like, I thought the accuracy, even in the intermediate, was so good. They had 355 yards of offense in the first half against Georgia. And Nick Sheridan, I know he's a guy that, like, if this goes south at any point, Nick Sheridan's going to be absolutely call it the whipping boy, the casualty, whatever you want to call it. For now, that's definitely not an issue with Alabama. But he was feeling it so much in this first half as an offensive play caller that they showed him in the booth very briefly. He's giving out blind fist pounds and connecting. Yeah. I mean,
no look fist bump, like a la Joe Burrow pass backwards. Crazy.
I don't know how you do that. I've never been in that kind of a zone. I can say that with absolute certainty. Georgia couldn't set the edge in the beginning, and it felt like Bama was getting some nice throwing windows. And even when they weren't getting the nice throwing windows, Jalen Milroe was getting help. And we'll get to those adjustments that Georgia made in a bit, but still, Milroe finishes the night as the first player in SEC history to throw for 350 yards, run for 100 yards, and complete 80% of his passes.
To 11 different receivers.
Unreal.
11 gentlemen caught a pass for Alabama.
Not just Ryan Williams. Like that is someone that is seeing the field, that is letting the game come to him, that is trusting in his scheme, trusting in his talent, and you saw that play out. Cole had this stat as well. Jalen Milroe becomes the first player in AP poll history, which dates back to 1939, I want to say. First player in AP poll history to have 300 rushing yards, 300 passing yards, rather. 300 rushing yards. Hold on. Buddy, we've been talking about a different kind of record. 300 passing yards, 100 rushing yards, and 2 rushing touchdowns against a top 5 opponent. And I mean, just beyond the statistics, the most important thing, the only thing that Jalen Milroe, the only thing that Bama fans were going to care about in this game was joining that ever-exclusive club, which consisted of just Joe Burrow before, beat Kirby Smart twice. Jalen Milroe, Joe Burrow, now in that club. You brought up Bill O'Brien. What do you think Bill O'Brien?
What position do you think this gentleman was?
Safety, I think.
Safety, not even a running back. He didn't get the Lamar treatment. He was put on defense. Okay.
Yeah, like you shouldn't even have the ball in your hands. If you get it in your hands by way of catching a pass somehow, congratulations. But yeah, just get down, run out of bounds. We don't want you to fumble or lose. Can you imagine being Bill O'Brien and watching that game, or even Tommy Rees? Because Saban in College Game Day kind of criticized the offensive plan with Milroe early on last season, of course. And that's pretty well documented. And they're like, let's just build a game plan to fit this guy's skill set and trying to fit him into whatever sort of offense that you want to run. And of course, the Jalen Milroe we saw in the second half of last year became one of the best players in college football. He wasn't this good. He wasn't this good. Scheme.
That's the thing.
Yes.
He was, like, I'm so vindicated in thinking Tommy Rees was never good, because now we've seen this player in an offense that, like, looks like me and my boys drew it up as far as let's get the guys open, let's have fun, let's not even saying that like we're like it was obvious. No, it was obvious last year. I'll just say that, like, he was not having fun last year. This is one of the most fun players. This is the most fun Alabama team of my life, probably. I have never rooted for Alabama in my life. I found myself doing that last night because I see the big smile on Jalen Milroe's face. I see the big smile on Ryan Williams' face. So I'm like, oh my gosh, this is no longer this evil empire that's kind of the offense is stuck in a box. It's got to do everything. It's like the ceiling is unlimited for these guys. They're if you're playing the way you were in the first half, who's stopping that?
41-point effort in this game. And yeah, Bama goes 39 minutes without a touchdown drive or something like that. Mm-hmm. And Georgia gets credit for those adjustments. But think about the last two instances we saw someone put up 41 against Georgia, against Kirby Smart's defense. 2022 Peach Bowl, CJ Stroud, a game that I came away from being like, oh my God, did not know that CJ Stroud had that type of performance in him. And I'm not saying I still was like, hey, I would take Bryce Young number 1 in the draft. And I've since proven to be very wrong about that. Yep, but that was the game. Yeah. Like hand up happens. But that was the game that made me go from like a CJ Stroud skeptic to seeing that in person being like, oh my God, this guy has everything you would ever want in a quarterback. This is going to break the mold of Ohio State quarterbacks. That game. And then Bryce Young 2021 SEC championship, another 41-point effort. The best game of Bryce Young's career, one of the best individual performances of the playoff era, bar none. And Jalen Milroe did that on Saturday night, and it was masterful. Let's talk about Ryan Williams.
Please.
Ryan Williams, that's the tweet. That's it. The game-winning touchdown was a play that we're not going to have an actual answer to this. But you watch the NFL. You're wearing Saints jersey right now. By the way, who is that jersey?
This is DeMario Davis.
Course, I could have totally guessed number 56 on the Saints, obviously.
Yeah.
Shout out.
Tyrann Mathieu's dirty. I'm not buying a Derek Carr jersey. Here we are.
There you go. Okay. Nothing wrong with that. You got to get a little bit unique with the jerseys sometimes. Mm-hmm. I would love to know how many NFL players could have made the play that Ryan Williams made for the game-winning touchdown. Everything. And not just the catch, the body control to make the catch, but the body control to split two defenders, to tightrope the sideline, to have that acceleration. Every element of that play was, oh my God. I just stopped on a dime.
Yep.
I struggle to find words when we see stuff like that. And I know that it's only September of his true freshman season. I feel like I've already run out of words to describe him, and that's a problem because he's got 2 more very prolific years ahead of him as long as he is healthy and on that football field, because I like the play that he made with Malachi Starks. With Malachi Starks kind of, I don't want to say draped all over him, but it was good coverage by an All-American safety. And he tipped the ball to himself like 3 different times.
Mm-hmm.
And he's, again, it's the body control. It's not having this heartbeat that's going, 160, 170 and forcing your head to be moving up and down. And I am just baffled. And I don't know how anyone is going to stop him in these next 3 years before he enters the NFL as a 19-year-old when he's doing all these workouts, which is just you think you're hearing about him as a 17-year-old after every catch he makes. Buddy, wait until people evaluate him at the NFL draft and they're like, he's only 19. Did you know that?
Man, you've brought all of this together. I'm just going to read you Ryan Williams' birthday.
Oh, it's depressing. It's so,
Ryan Williams was born on February 9th of 2007.
That is just after Saban accepted the Alabama job.
Oh my God.
That is somewhat. That's the last time the Bama was a home underdog.
He was like the prince that was promised. He's like born in a full moon. So how about this, right? Like, because I had the exact same takeaway. Maybe I'm a little bit more cynical with it, but like this was my immediate thought seeing this guy. It's like Bama fans, like you guys have been watching NFL number 2 receivers for like 10 years, right? This is not Jalen Waddle. This is not Devontae Smith. This is not Jerry Jeudy.
Devontae could be a number 1. Devontae could be a number 1 in other places. Devontae's off. This guy's different.
Jones. This is Julio Jones. I'm not even trying to be mean. If you want to compare Devontae Smith to Julio Jones,
well,
this is Julio Jones. This is the guy who is like, this is a trajectory. Like, because remember, I'm an LSU fan. I've seen Malik Neighbors, Justin Jefferson, Odell Beckham. This is one of those guys. This is not one of, oh my gosh, you're gonna make a Pro Bowl. No. This is a game-changing football player.
Is it disrespectful to Ryan Williams to suggest that he's already right on par with the players that Julio Jones and Amari Cooper became at Alabama. By the time I'm talking like by the time they're done at Alabama, is Ryan Williams already on that level? Because this cat is averaging 29 and a half yards per catch. He was leading the country with 28 and a half yards per catch, and it went up against Georgia. It's so absurd.
He's not 6'4". Like, that's the other insane. He's like Jerry Rice, dog. Because when you see one of those small guys that could just get over, like, I watched Calvin Johnson highlights the other day when I was working out. I was like, this makes sense. This is like entertaining, but this just makes sense. Like, there's nothing really crazy about this. Watching that catch that Ryan Williams had where he bobbled it to himself, I'm like, I'm scared because I think you have a time distortion device. I don't know what you do next. That's what scares me about you, Ryan Williams.
I don't know how he sees the world, how he sees balls that are coming to him in live football.
It's like a podcast going at 0.75 speed is like the world he lives in. Like, he has so much time to react to everything.
Kalen DeBoer getting that guy to keep his commitment.
Mm-hmm.
My goodness. What a monumental move that was. And I remember, we wrote about it like right after it happened, and there was this feeling of like, all right, this is really important because he's the 5-star that, I can't remember which podcast he went on and talked about this, but he was like, yeah, Jalen Milroe, Gravedigger, that play pretty much prevented me from flipping to Auburn. Mm-hmm. And while Auburn certainly has no shortage of 5-star freshman receivers, with all due respect to Malcolm Simmons and Kim Coleman, they definitely don't have Jalen Milroe either. But think about that too. Think about Kalen DeBoer getting Ryan Williams to keep his Bama commitment, reaffirm, whatever you want to call it, and not really having any sort of recruitment period with Jalen Milroe. I mean, selling to that guy, hey, this is going to be different than what we did. Than what you did last year. And it's going to be different than what I did at Washington with Michael Penix. And there are going to be concepts that are really similar. And we're going to do what we can to be able to build up these receivers. I got just the guy coming in with Jamarcus Shepard. And we're going to figure out ways to get you better throwing windows. But trust in me and trust in what I am capable of doing. And Jalen Milroe was like, hell yeah, sign me up. And you heard him say it on this podcast. You heard him say it at SEC Media Days, a lot of other places of like, I truly believe in this dude. And it's just such a win early on for Kalen DeBoer, regardless of how this season plays out. Even if it doesn't end up being Bama, reaching a national championship, which I realize when you win a game like this, that's all of a sudden the standard once again. And it's crazy to think that that's a standard for a year one coach. Maybe we're getting ahead of ourselves for saying that. But man, just what a day for the Kalen DeBoer proof of concept. If you didn't believe in that guy before, I think you should after that. I don't think there should be skepticism about what he's capable of doing.
Yeah, I think, you know me, I'm always a skeptic, you know what I'm saying? I think skepticism, especially in the SEC, is often proven to be true, right? But this is a masterclass. This is take a bow. I mean, like I said, we got 11 different receivers catching balls. True highest among them is a 17-year-old who looks like the second coming of, Julio Jones or whatever, who has 200 yards. Like, this is just, yeah, I mean, that's the thing that we were wondering was, how will this translate to the SEC? What about these advanced scheme concepts with 4 and 5 star elite athletes in them? And I mean, honestly, that's all. I've never been more complimentary of Bama. Like I said, I enjoyed watching them for the first time. I was not screaming at my television. I felt joy watching the University of Alabama because they played a fun, cool version of like offensive football. Their players appeared to be having fun. I related to them in a way that I never have before. That being said, one of these teams certainly looked like they didn't belong in this game.
Yeah.
And it was not the first-year head coach almost at all. At the end, it got a little bit touch and go there, but goodness, I mean, they blew the doors off of this team to start off this game.
Yeah, and think about that too. Like Kane Womack, I know like his defense down the stretch, like they struggled. They had moments in which Carson Beck figured things out. It looked like he was getting whatever he wanted. But if you had told anyone that Alabama's defense was going to make Carson Beck look like that in the first half, that would have been a huge win for Kane Womack, who, look, that's a hire that is obviously really important for Kalen DeBoer in this early part of his tenure there. And that looked awesome. And they looked so ready to go. They were one step ahead of everything Georgia was doing. They looked so unbelievably prepared. And that's a massive, massive win. But think about like what this means for DeBoer to continue this run against Georgia, which, by the way, that's now 9 Alabama victories in the last 10 matchups against Georgia.
And we unpicked them Every time, like that's the thing is every time it feels like it's a new game, and every time we turn
Uh,
on that PlayStation, and Big Bro is still whooping it.
it still is. I mean, Nick Saban is high above there, looking down at his field, the field that is named after him.
I
And
feel like he had to be upset after that first quarter. He's like, "Y'all
no,
making this look too easy, bro. Look,
the
last year we had to at least have a dogfight with this team, y'all."
I'm kind of surprised we didn't get more shots of Saban. I like the under definitely hit him what we were talking about in the preview pod, but they showed him after they got off to the 28-0 lead and he had like a fist pound. It's almost like Saban's trying to do like the unbiased media thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that Saban can ever possibly be unbiased about Bama. That'd be really weird. But like this scene that was created in that building was significant. Very, very significant. Kalen DeBoer very much has a playoff caliber team who can make it to Atlanta. And for a lot of people that were saying like, nah, Bama's more of like a 9-3 type team. They're going to be on the outside looking in. Yeah, I mean, instead of being the guy to end Bama's SEC regular season winning streak, which by the way, dates back to 2022 at LSU. You might remember that game. DeBoer looks every bit prepared for the job that he signed up for. I can't get over the opening script, how good it was. They are very much bought in, and they can show up like that. There's a reason this guy's 13-2 against AP top 25 teams as a head coach. It's pretty darn good. And maybe the most satisfying moment for a Bama fan, besides Ryan Williams just being an alien when the game was on the line, DeBoer.
These highlights are on this ESPN page. Oh my goodness, this kid is so nice. I gotta pause this.
This would be an It Just Meant More candidate for us to be able to do, which we haven't done one of those in a bit. And we might have to circle back and do that after the season ends with this game because it was silly. But how about
we get to watch this child grow before our eyes on this pod? Like, oh my goodness, sorry, this kid's only gonna get taller. If anything, he's 17.
Yeah, I mean, I stopped growing when I was a freshman in high school. Who knows if Ryan Williams has stopped growing, stopped improving as a receiver. But how about Kalen DeBoer going full Saban when it's 30-7 and very clear missed DPI that went
officiating
uncalled.
was tough in this game. Nobody called it a conspiracy, but it was pretty bad.
Yeah, there's some tough moments on both sides. It felt like, and Kirby, when the visor for Kirby gets cocked to the right a little bit in the first half, that's when you know he's like shaking his head. He's losing his mind. He had some moments where he was certainly not pleased. But Kalen DeBoer losing his mind.
This was a devastating day for visors, right? Gundy got cooked. Lane Kiffin lost.
True.
Worst day in visor history, to be honest with you.
Up there. Certainly was up there. DeBoer losing his mind up 30-7. Welcome to the SEC. Welcome. That's
your guy right there.
You are officially part of this conference. You did as your forefathers have done, and you freaked out in a moment that significant because obviously we know what the game turned into. But yeah, the first act in a big time game, he certainly passed that test, and I think Bama deserves to be number one. Schedule is still tough, but I have no problem saying that I think Bama is the most worthy team of that spot, even more so than Texas. That was even more impressive than Texas going into Michigan and winning that game. So far, win of the year, game of the year, regular season game of the decade. All of that is on the table for what we saw on Saturday night.
Like I said, I didn't think I was capable of being this nice to Bama. So can I go roast Georgia now, please?
Yeah, let's talk about Georgia because Kirby Smart's 1-6 against Bama, in case you haven't heard. 42-game regular season winning streak. That is done. Since the start of 2021, Kirby Smart 44-0 against everyone not named Alabama and 1-3 against Alabama. The negative is that Georgia's gauntlet schedule, very well documented. Even in the 12-team playoff era, we know that getting to 10 wins, while I still believe that Georgia will get to 10 wins, I think Georgia has a really good chance of getting to 11 wins in the regular season. It's just not a given. It's just not a given with what they have to face. I was stunned, absolutely stunned, that after Georgia watched its three-peat bid go up in smoke at the hands of Alabama in that SEC championship last year, that was the opening response because coaching, mindset, none of it was there for Georgia. And Kirby admitted afterwards, like I didn't have them ready. I didn't have them ready to go. Now that part, if you're a Georgia fan like that's tough to stomach because there are going to be games in which maybe you can't find those answers and maybe you can't rally back. And Georgia did that and made it into an all-time classic game. And the fact that Georgia led at any point of that game in the second half is still one of those things that you're like, wait, what?
For like 14 seconds.
Yeah, yeah. Was it 14 seconds?
Okay.
Yeah. I mean that's the negative. Do you want to start with the negative before we get to the silver lining? Go ahead.
I actually this changed how I thought about Georgia a little bit. This is what I was scared of when they hired Mike Bobo. Almost exactly.
These are your words, not mine. Let the record show.
Sure. But we both said it at the time. There's a reason why Mike Bobo is not taking Georgia to the promised land. This, on one side, was a coaching staff that was prepared, an offense that was on the same page. Jalen Milroe had a different offensive coordinator each of his 3 years he didn't start with Bryce Young, but every time he started a game, he had a different offensive coordinator in 3 years.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
So the guy, they thought it was safety. This offense is so much farther than yours is right now when you have had continuity. This guy was like roommates with your coach. It's not going to get better than this under Mike Bobo. Like, I gave him a chance after the SEC championship game, and I went, "Oh my gosh, you guys smashed Florida State. Good job." You see it. Like, we could. It's just like Hugh Freeze. Like we talked about in the preview. Okay, Hugh Freeze is probably cooked if he loses the Oklahoma game. We're not talking about it now, but we will be. That's where we're at with Mike Bobo. You can't go into this game talking about Carson Beck could be, the Heisman conversation, talking about you got all these transfers. We've sitting here talking about Georgia can't develop wide receivers for like 3 or 4 years. Alabama just finds one who's 17 who smokes you. The fact that this offense looks like if I tried, like, it looks like my parents using social media. Like, yeah, it's not the same offense they used in 2014 or whatever. Congratulations. It's got a little bit more motion. It still looks like a boomer is running your offense. I want you guys to succeed. I rooted for you for this entire game, and we were all disappointed. This was supposed to be a game. I saw Marler pick y'all by 10 points. This was supposed to be a game where we all marched into Tuscaloosa and established that you were the big kids on the block. And instead, we have a 17-year-old and Jalen Milroe looking like Jerry Rice and Joe Montana. What is going on? Like, genuinely, what is going on? Like,
those receivers weren't ready to go, too. Like, I don't know what that pregame when Carson Beck a lot of mistakes in the first half. So I'm not
Carson Beck played terribly this game. Carson Beck never figured out this defense. I know the announcers did a lot of work to try to make it seem like he did. He threw a ball directly to a defensive back in this game.
Yeah, I mean that play at the end.
He never figured this out. There was not a second they figured this out.
I thought
for a second they opened up the offense. For a second they followed a game script that they should have from the beginning.
Yeah,
that doesn't mean he ever figured out Alabama's defense.
I think that's fair, and I think if you look at some of the stuff that he usually excels at between the hashes, he struggled at that. And when they started to get those chunk plays, it was like, all right, well, Dylan Bell made just a ridiculous double move, and he's got like 8 yards of separation to be able to get downfield. Mm-hmm. Arian Smith had that long catch, of course, and ends up having a bigger day. I thought Dom Lovett had some nice moments later on, but like, yeah, at the end, it was kind of just like, all right, do we have a matchup that we kind of like on the outside? Let's just go attack it instead of trying to like fit this into a window over zone coverage, and you're not throwing the ball over these linebackers in the way that you thought you would be able to. And he was totally perplexed by that. And that's a lack of prep. That's that scheme not working in your favor. And like that first drive when Georgia comes out and you have a fumble on a Trevor Etienne, it was like a Trevor Etienne screen, I think it was. And where he like spins into the defense. And like, I remember thinking at the time, sometimes you like anticipate something and you're like, is he going to, I don't think he's going to hold on to the football if he does that. And then sure enough, like he fumbles it and they retain possession. But you had that, you had an offensive pass interference, and then you had a bad drop on a ball that ball to Arian Smith was put in a bucket by Carson Beck. And if he hits that early on, I think that first half goes differently. I really do, and I think Georgia's feeling a little bit more mojo and it's back and forth.
I think Alabama was going to put this on them no matter what. Considering the fact that they didn't punt for like 45 minutes, I think that was going to happen regardless.
Well, yeah, they weren't going to stop out. They weren't stopping Alabama from a defensive standpoint.
And that's the deal. Mike Bobo was never going to catch them. That's the point. It doesn't matter what Mike Bobo does. He was never going to catch them. That's my overall point. Is like, yeah, okay, maybe if everything went differently, they could have in theory been in this game, but that doesn't matter because I don't know. Like I'm just looking at what Georgia does well on offense, and it's have better talent than the teams they play. Right? You see on the Alabama side a 4- or 5-star athlete, guys that are ready to go in the strength and conditioning program on the same page, and good schemes. Right? It's not exclusive. This is like watching, and because I know, guys, I'm a Louisiana State University fan. I know what having Odell Beckham and Juice Landry run slant routes looks like. You're doing that. Like, I'm just letting you know that. Like, you can, again, you guys are going to beat up on worse teams than you forever. Like, good job. Cool. Then what? Because like that's where we're at right now. We're at a point where the good teams are hiring, Steve Sarkisian and like these genius play callers, and you guys still have Mike Bobo. And like I said, like that's what Georgia does well. Like when you say what does Georgia does well, they push teams around. They're bigger, stronger, faster than teams. They do not have a schematic advantage over anybody we saw against Kentucky.
Not having Tate Ratledge did not allow Georgia to be able to push Bama around. Bama had that advantage on the interior defensive line. Like that there was, I mean, if we're like actually talking about specifics of this game. This is a Bama team
that just got decimated by the transfer portal because the coach they just lost the greatest coach of all time. We talk about Georgia doesn't have their starting center. You're right. Like I'm not
right guard, not center.
Right,
but yeah,
and interior offensive lineman because they were also playing like they played Bobo's son, which is really cute and inspirational. I love that story. I'm a sucker for that stuff. But boy, howdy, was I like, it's in your fault, buddy. It's all your dad.
Yeah, I thought the offensive game plan they had zero rhythm whatsoever, and obviously they're able to hit on those chunk plays late, and that's like if you're a Georgia fan finding the silver lining in the 12-team playoff era, that is it. Like your team,
you will play worse teams than Alabama, but then you'll play teams on this level again. And that's
yeah, I
what
mean,
I'm worried about.
Your team is down 30-7 on the road when it's like very evident that you're overmatched completely. And you come back and you get a lead in that game. Like I'm
trying to tell you, we both picked this team to win, convincing. That's what I'm saying.
I agree.
The comeback requires no credit because oh my God, you figured out that Carson Beck should throw the football more. Congratulations, dude.
You're throwing the football a lot in the first half. It wasn't
successfully.
Not successfully.
I'm talking about opening it up. I'm talking about we're trying to get 3 yards in a cloud of dust against the Alabama Crimson Tide and Nick Saban Field at Bryant-Denny Stadium. Kid Rock is in the stands, and you were trying to run HB Power with Trevor Etienne. What are you doing?
He only had 12 rushing attempts in this game. I mean, it wasn't like they were sitting there beating their head
rotating the backs. I'm just saying, like, schematically, from an offensive standpoint, they were trying to play power football. Like, I was joking during that whole run about never a bad time to establish the run game. Like, they would just get out there and be like, all right, boys, 0-0 game. Let's just get out there and run a little quick sweep. Like, dude, Alabama is running a quadruple reverse laughing at you. And you're just like, all right, boys.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are people that'll feel differently because of the way that Georgia's defense responded in the second half of that game, and they'll look at that and go,
"What does that have to do with Mike Bobo?"
No,
I tell you.
No, I know.
Their defense is supposed to be better. Their defense is not supposed to get cooked by a 17-year-old. That's a separate other issue. I'm talking about their game plan.
I know. I agree. I agree with that point. Let's move on from that point. Okay, we agree. The offensive game plan was not particularly good. I am saying that if you are down 30-7 on the road and you are getting your teeth kicked in and you look like Apollo Creed next to Ivan Drago, you are praying that your team shows a freaking pulse in the second half of that game. Because if you don't, we're talking about Georgia in a different way. And I do think that, and we can agree to disagree.
I'm still talking about Georgia that way. That's all I'm saying, because I'm aware that Jalen Miller was always going to win that game, dog. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Jalen Miller won the Auburn game last year. It didn't matter what Georgia did after they got down 30 points. Like, that's what I'm trying to tell you is like, this is this game was just like the Oklahoma game in the playoff that they had against Kyler Murray. Alabama came in there and got up 28 points and the final score looked close.
I mean, Georgia got the lead. It wasn't like Georgia
for 14 seconds. Georgia had the lead in the game that we wanted them that we thought they would win by 10 points. You're exactly right. And then,
yeah, I mean, we can agree to disagree on this. Okay. So what are you saying, Georgia? You think Georgia becomes this year?
I mean, I think they're going to beat everyone who's worse than them. That's what I've always said. I think the issue.
So what? Like, give me like, all right, are they going to the SEC championship? Are they going to college football playoff? Are they going to be 8-4? Like, put your name on something.
Let me see. Let me peep their schedule now that I have seen this.
They still have games at Texas. They still have to face Tennessee. They still have a game at Ole Miss.
Oh man, yeah, I could see. I mean, I could see another, at least 1 or 2 losses in here, just based on. It just depends on a couple of teams, right? Like Texas didn't look great yesterday, but it's still at Texas. Like, that's the thing. I think Texas is certainly a better football team than Georgia right now. I think Tennessee is going to be an interesting matchup. It's at home again, so I don't want to start picking Tennessee again. But, like, it's about – and like, Tennessee is turning into a team that pushes people around, that doesn't need a finesse game. When you're a finesse team, Georgia can smash you in the mouth. We've seen that. Georgia loves playing smash mouth football. And we saw that work against Ole Miss, like, this Saturday, like yesterday. But at the same time, man, when you get in these actual playoff environments, having more playoff games does not help Georgia. That's what I'm trying to tell you. They're going to need to kind of almost get lucky against good teams if they're going to try to play this style.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think that I think Georgia fans would agree with you that they're disappointed. Maybe not to the level that you've laid out, but there's still I think a lot to be able to figure out with this team in early September. And
Mhm.
that game was still awesome. And I'm glad that Georgia came back for the sake of my
Of
entertainment
course,
because
it was a great
my
game. I'm not saying it was a bad game at all.
my father-in-law is texting me like they should just turn this game off. They should have something else on for the rest of these like 2 hours. And obviously he doesn't have a dog in the fight, but what that game turned into was something that I think we'll be talking about for a while because it
Yeah,
definitely felt very, very special. What a night for these games don't mean anything anymore crowd.
yeah, and that's the thing. You got to keep telling yourself too. If you're a fan of either of these teams, like losses don't matter as much. Like Ole Miss fans definitely feeling that today. It's like you're everything you want still right in front of you, and like that's the thing. Like I do hate to be doom and gloom guy. Like I said, I'm an LSU fan. I've lost to Bama in every way that you could possibly imagine. I get it, I really do. But like point being, like I think that's the key is that we can't get too wrapped up in these early season games because number one, we're going to start to see more of them. I mean, we saw so much. There's parity because of the transfer portal, number one. But then number two, teams are going to go outside of themselves more and schedule these games, which they're already starting to do a little bit more. No, this is a in conference game. This game was always going to happen. I understand that, but we've seen every week has had some really crazy seismic thing that feels new this year. So point being, like teams' schedules are getting harder overall because of super conferences and that conference scheduling, and because guys are more or because you have to be more comfortable with losing. And so yeah, I think that this is an insane. Crossroads because we still have the old school mentality of this game means everything. In reality, to your point, like yeah, you still got to play the rest of the games. Georgia could win every game, and they should be favored in every game from here on out. The Texas game
And
is
not
at
at Texas. I don't know
Yeah,
if they're going to be
now
favored at Texas.
that one would have been close before today. Probably going to be a Texas like lean slightly, but yeah, outside of that, they'll be favored in every game. And again, like based on their pedigree, you should like them if you're a Georgia fan against Texas. But yeah, that's the key is like just not being as reactionary as I am right now to a degree, but at the same time fixing. It's like polls. Like when you're looking at politics, it's like it doesn't exactly matter, but it's a general. When you start to see things go a certain way, you got to address that. That's my only point.
Yeah, thrilling game. Might have to watch a replay once or twice. All right,
just the Ryan Williams highlights they play on ESPN. Chef's kiss. I'll give you 12 out of 10 on that.
Yeah. All right, let's talk Kentucky and Ole Miss. Will
Let's do it.
The Jimmy Carter game.
Oh my goodness!
For the first time since 1978. Kentucky wins in Oxford. For the first time since 1977, Kentucky beats a top 6 team on the road. Holy cow. And a top 6 team on the road. Yes, that's correct because Louisville was outside of the top 6. That's right. It was like the second time in program history that they beat an SEC team that was ranked in the AP top 10 on the road. If you can follow that. This game was bananas. If we had just gotten this one and not what we saw with Georgia and Bama, we still would have been like, wow, what a wild, unpredictable Saturday. But I don't feel like it's too reactionary to say the worst loss of the Kiffin era, the best win of the Stoops era. Let's start with Stoops. We're going to get to Kiffin. I know you're going to tee off on Kiffin. Kentucky was a 2-2 team who came into Saturday searching for its first touchdown against an SEC team, having dropped both of those games, right? It would have been very, very easy for Kentucky to have a breaking point, especially after the close loss to Georgia. If they had come in and said like, and I realized they had a game last week as well. They got to beat up on Ohio, but if they had come into that game going, we're already 0-2 in SEC play, Ole Miss is going to run this tempo. Defensively, maybe we're just sick of bailing out the offense. We'll show up for the first quarter, and then after that, I don't know. Did not happen. We're going to say some really negative things about Ole Miss's national championship bid. But in the do we still give a crap index, I thought like that. And maybe that's something that I should put a little bit more thought behind because I think certain teams experience that in different ways. But in that, I thought Kentucky passed with flying colors. Brock Vandagriff has taken hits this year. He has taken as many hits as any quarterback in the SEC, a lot of which is his doing, a lot of which is the Big Blue Gate. He still kept stepping up in this game and making plays. And the toughness that he has shown so far has been the biggest thing for him moving forward. He has shown that he is willing to keep bouncing back and keep going out there and not just spiral out of control. And he deserves credit for that. The most notable play was that 4th and 7 from Kentucky's 20 when Stoops goes, hey, you guys didn't like that I punted against Georgia? Screw it. We're going for it. 4th and 7. Boom. 63-yard completion to Barryon Brown, Kentucky's longest play of the season. By the way, Barryon Brown had been virtually invisible because Dane Key was the one who was going off. He was dominating the targets, and Barryon Brown stayed locked into that game. How about the play that took the lead? It's the backup quarterback, Gavin Wimsatt, who came over from Rutgers. He comes in for the goal-to-go spot. He stayed locked in, but he fumbles, and somehow, that gets recovered and taken into the end zone by Josh Caddis, who had a brutal day with the drop. And Sean McDonough was like kind of blasting him. And it was like, oh man, like I can't imagine like being his family listening to this right now. That's probably not going to go over particularly well. And it was like a college football 25 glitch play that they scored on. If that happens,
to you, you're so bad.
That controller's going to the moon. Okay. Like there's no way any Ole Miss fan looked at that without pure like just disgust of how can that possibly happen in that moment. That is the type of play that never, ever goes the way of Kentucky football. Okay? Ever. And we can go back to Dorian's got a touchdown. We can go back to certain LSU, Bluegrass Miracle.
Yep.
None of those plays go Kentucky's way. Much like in the exact same building 2 years ago when Will Levis has those fumbles late. And you're like, oh my God, what is Kentucky just can't ever do anything to help itself. But fumble luck favors the Cats. Ole Miss had the last ditch drive, which included a remarkable 4th down conversion to Caden Prieskorn, as well as a.
Oh man, that throw. I felt that in slow motion with a future track behind it when he was like 45 degrees throwing the ball at Prieskorn, caught it. It like,
I don't know how Kentucky had such little help in the back end of the defense. And I can't remember the defensive back who was like, lost track of the football in that spot. And I don't know if he thought Jackson Dart was going to try and run for it and try and pick it up on 4th down, whatever the case may be. When that play happened, every Kentucky fan and their mother is going, well, that was fun. This is over. That we had him dead to rights. And instead we see Jackson Dart just take a sack that you absolutely can't take in that spot. But Brock Vandegrift outplaying Jackson Dart was not on my bingo card. I don't know why I'm playing bingo during the middle of entertaining football games, but nonetheless, was not on my bingo card.
We thought we'd have time for bingo with this one if these teams kept up to form. And boy, was this, this was a rock fight, unfortunately.
It really was. And Vandegrift still got his fair share of hits taken by an Ole Miss defensive line that, honestly, I thought it kind of kept them in that game. It really did. They had 10 TFLs in this game. Like, the Ole Miss defensive line is really freaking good. Whatever, but it turns out Kentucky's defensive front, with friend of the program, Deion Walker. That showed us why Georgia struggled so much. It really did. Like Deion Walker, JJ Weaver, Octavius Oxendine, like those guys were all great. They had to be, because without Maxwell Harrison, like we talked about a lot in the preview pod of, he's going to be locked on Trey Harris. We find out before the game, he's not going to be playing in this one. Without that, I think Jackson Dart would have had more success targeting non-Trey Harris options if he had some time, but he really didn't. Just a heck of a game plan by Brad White and that Kentucky defense. Mark Stoops earned the right to win that rock fight. And I'm going to give Stoops some credit, because I criticized the fact that he did not make any defensive staff changes after last year, after they were very atypically, I'm going to say it, they were soft last year. Like Kentucky's defense was soft last year, and they did not hold up that standard that we have just come to expect. We just penciled in for Stoops, and they trusted the continuity, and it worked out. And I think so far, so good. This is the ultimate why they play the games type of upset. And for Kentucky, it beats the heck out of being 0-3 in SEC play in September. Crowd surfing head coach after beating a top 6 team on the road. You'll take that 100 times out of 100.
One of the happiest I've ever been for a head coach. Like
Toby Keith win. Big time.
Yes. He like straight up did not know what to do with his hands. Like you look at him, he's just like,
yeah,
like he's just like pumping both of his fists at the same time in different rotations. Like it felt like he's been waiting for that win for his entire career.
Even bigger than the Louisville win, because he always beats up on.
Of course,
Louisville.
Like honestly, that's his little bro. Yeah.
Okay, it's the worst loss for Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss.
Now, I will dig into that. So the 2022 season has several candidates.
But
so we're looking.
I know.
Mississippi State.
But here's the thing. Will, you already had expectations dashed that season, right? They lose that game to LSU where they were up at halftime and they blow it there. They suffer the second loss was before Arkansas. They lost to Arkansas in a game that was like freezing cold. I think it was like 42-27. There was like 800 combined rushing yards. Rocket Sanders
they lost to Alabama and LSU in 3 weeks before that. Yeah,
right. So they watched their playoff hopes go up in smoke by the time that they were suffering those bad losses, which in theory maybe that's going to end up being to worse teams, I guess. Mm-hmm. But with everything,
they also lost to Texas Tech that season.
Yes, they did in a bowl game that it's like.
I don't think this is immediately the worst.
I think it. No, I think it is. Will, I think it is.
The worst loss, yeah.
Here's like everything is in front of them, and they have had nothing but smooth sailing behind them. For the anti-Kiffin crowd, that was. I don't want to say it was pre-tarmac USC type of a loss. Go back to that loss that he had at Arizona, preseason number 1. That was their second loss of the season. They lose to an unranked Arizona team that wipes off their BCS National Championship hopes. It's a loss that happened like late October. I can't remember who the Arizona quarterback was. That was before Khalil Tate. Mm-hmm. It was that type of loss because when you have those expectations and we've had nothing to suggest that you are incapable of meeting those expectations, that people were still talking about for your team. A team that could win a national championship, not just be frisky, which that was the conversation with 22. 22, we looked at that team at that great start and we're like, I think even going into that LSU game, we're saying they still have some holes. I still don't like how they match up against like a Georgia and Alabama or anything like that. But, and we were still like, you know what, Jackson Dart, he still has to show some things. And like, I remember kind of how I felt about that team after they got up to that great start. Mm-hmm. This is different because I think we could have all understood if it was just a flat start for Ole Miss as a number 6 team in college football. Noon kick, not a rival, hazy skies. We know that the competition level so far to this point had been lacking. Very well documented. But it was clear that one team was in its third SEC game and one team was in its first. Because Ole Miss had the number 1 offense in America. Mm-hmm. And they had zero rhythm in that football game after the opening drive. 92 yards on the ground, 111 sack-adjusted rushing yards, still the worst rushing output for a Lane Kiffin team since last year against Bama. Mm-hmm. Dart was just too casual at times. Like, where was the sense of urgency from him? He had nobody but Trey Harris. I'm not sure where Prieskorn was for the majority of that game up until that last play. I'm not sure where Juice Wells was. I think he had a bad drop in this one as well. Like, Trey Harris is the only dude that showed up on that entire offense.
It looked like Juice Wells recorded a stat, which is interesting.
A drop.
No, I'm just saying, like, he didn't have a catch. Like,
I think he had a drop.
They just took him out. They were like, nope, all right, don't need Juice Wells today.
Like that,
sorry. Dude, like, probably the right move. You got it.
By the way, Trey Harris is so awesome.
He's so good,
freaking good. Like, I know people are sick of hearing me talk about Trey Harris, but I hope people are starting to realize that. Like, the play that he made on 4th and 7 right after he had fumbled in the red zone, that just showed how explosive he is. Jackson Dart was not throwing to anybody else but him in that moment. But here's the problem. Here's the problem. And I know I've gone on long, so I'm going to let you tee off for a second here, but let me just get this thought out. The problem for Ole Miss, something we talked about in the offseason, the defensive line upgrades in the portal, that was supposed to be the thing that bridged the gap between Ole Miss and the contenders, right? Mm-hmm. I think so far, so good in that department. Whatever Walter Nolan and Princely Umanmielen got with NIL, worth it. And they're underpaid, if anything, with how good they've looked at this point. But that offensive line didn't hold up at all. The upgrades weren't there. And they have not looked particularly good in those big-time games against the Alabamas and against the Georgias with that offensive line. Jackson Dart, when he cannot step up in the pocket and find receivers, he struggles. And what's next for Ole Miss? South Carolina with that defensive line coming off a bye week. Yep. I think Kyle Kennard and Dylan Stewart are going to have their ears pinned back because they are. Like, that's a troubling thing
at South Carolina.
Yeah.
Da-da-da-da.
Not great. And that's the biggest issue. It's not like there's grace in the 12-team playoff era. There's grace. Mm-hmm. But that offensive line, man, against a blue-collar Kentucky team, problem. Big problem.
Yeah, I love podcasts like today because I actually am kind of like the other way on it. Like, I think they'll probably be fine. I think this is just you don't. It's funny like telling the story here because I'm like explaining my girl football this year because it's like our first like focus. She'd moved to Atlanta and like just kept telling the story of like Mark Stoops and his just like Steel Factory, Young Sal, and JJ Weaver. I was like telling the story of Lynn Bowden and like this guy Stoops does like 3 things well, but he just kind of does them all the time, and like all the other things almost kind of really don't matter because he does these things well. And like you look up, and this is just exactly the hell that they had Georgia locked in last week, isn't it? I mean, this is like we started the season with them getting smoked by South Carolina, and we talked about the time. Is this a puke on your shoes game? Yes. Sometimes Stoops
how is that the outlier, Will? How is South Carolina the outlier and Georgia isn't? Like that's
at home.
That's crazy.
At home, yeah. not in Columbia. Like not with the home crowd. Like just puking all over. Just bleh. We're going. Does he want to be a football coach anymore?
Yeah, like is Mark Stoops about to go full 2015 Spurrier and just quit?
Just quit. Go just be a bourbon guy. I think he's like single. He's just like, I don't want to hire another offensive coordinator. I'm out of here, boys. Figure this one out. Y'all just lost a basketball coach. You replaced the football coach, and now he plays an amazing game against Georgia, which is like probably his top 10 or so games he's coached at Kentucky. And I mean, like I said, the biggest one of his career is awesome, but like, at the same time, going back to the Ole Miss part of it, right? I'm just not as worried about this. Here's the thing about Lane Kiffin. And this is just who Lane Kiffin is. Like, we've been talking about this now for 3 years. Like, believe you are the person you act like on social media. Okay? I said this. This is why him and Dan Mullen are kind of cousins in that way. He needs to be this person with the, I don't know how to say this, the gumption. He needs to be this person with the belief in himself who is going to do the, bleep you stuff, like the 4th down call that you just talked about. He went in there and played like he had his tail between his legs. You know what I'm saying?
Big time.
And to me, I look at Ole Miss and I go, your problems are internal. Like, I think you have a good play caller. I think you have talent. I think you just got beat up by the older, like, O'Doyle rules bully, like we were joking about. Like, you just got out physical. You got out toughness. I don't think it's a Jimmy's and Joe's issue. I don't think it's an X's and O's issue. I think this is just what Lane Kiffin does sometimes, kind of like Stoops. So if I'm going to not as much be worried about the puke on your shoes game from Stoops, 2-3 games a year, Lane Kiffin is a roll of toilet paper. Again, people in Gainesville, have fun. If you want to do that, I think Ole Miss is a perfect job for Lane Kiffin for this reason. They had the greatest season in program history. I mean, we can all remember that, people had certain rights in the modern era last year. Okay. So point being, you can't, as an Ole Miss fan, sit here and just be like, woe is me. Like, you guys are still going to be probably fine. The 12-team playoff is ahead of you. You come out of this day and you go, hey, Georgia looks a lot more beatable than we thought. That's really going to be our test and was always going to be our test. If you were thinking to yourself, well, we could just beat everybody but Georgia and then lose that game and make the playoffs, like, you're a loser, bro. So, like, I can't even, like, this season, now you really get to learn about your team. Now you really get to learn about your head coach. But it doesn't really change anything. And if anything, it makes Georgia a little bit more beatable because they didn't go into Bryant Denny and stomp Bama by 20. So at the end of the day, like, I don't even know. I think this just is what it is. This is, once it started happening, it wasn't all that shocking to me. Kind of like we talked about Georgia. We're going to know in the first 5 minutes. I meant to say that in that preview. Same here. It's like, oh, you're locked in a Mark Stoops game. And to be fair, like, they came out and they scored immediately, right? And when you see that, we talked about the scripted plays. That means you're not adjusting. That means you're not game planning. That means you're not, like, it's so simple to me. You could move the ball against this defense if you so choose. If you want to do it your way, if you want to do it the way you want to do it, then you're not going to be able to do it because, like, that's the thing about Lane Kiffin. He does kind of still have that, I don't know what, like, entitlement where he's just like, well, if I just do it my way, everyone else is going to adjust. And it's like, no, they're not. You're going to get punched in the mouth by Mark Stoops and his factory and Young Sal, and that's how it's going to be, brother. So, yeah, I'm really just not even that worried because this is Ole Miss. This is Lane Kiffin. This is what they do. I think this is what this program has been. They're a fun, cool place to be. That now the 12-team playoff is going to be massive for them. Some of these teams with the Eli Mannings, with the Matt Corrals, may have had a chance to compete in that playoff. But this is about sometimes when you play with fire, and that fire is Mark Stoops in a weird NCAA play with their tight end whose name is Cats.
Caddis. Not Cats.
Cats.
I think it all depends on what your expectations for Ole Miss were coming into this season.
Mm-hmm.
I heard as recently, I heard Matt Leinart going Russillo talking about, like, I think Ole Miss is like a legit national title contender.
Mm-hmm.
They have flaws up front, and they have a quarterback in Jackson Dart who I still like, and I think he's one of the best quarterbacks in college football. I think he had a bad day at the office, but I think you saw ways that you can fluster him still at this stage of his career. I think so much of the question with Jackson Dart was how unflappable would he be? Would he have the poise? And he had the poise to be able to make that big time fourth down conversion to Caden Prescorn, and he deserves credit for that. But like some of the moments at the end of that game where you're just like, dude, you can't take that sack. You absolutely cannot take that sack of, oh, I don't know that you're trusting scheme right now. I don't know that you're trusting anybody but Trey Harris to be able to get open. And if it's not there, you're tucking it and running it. And it's Jalen Hurts 2017 in the Brian Dable offense with Calvin Ridley. That's the comp that I always bring up, like the one read and go. Yeah, the one read and go. And if my guy's not open, I'm booking it, and I'm going to be booking it against a defensive line that can actually get after me. So I think you're right in that if you were of the belief that Ole Miss wasn't the world beater that the first month suggested, that game all of a sudden didn't push you in this opposite direction. So I think that's very fair.
Yeah. I think this game is about expectations. Like at the end of the day, and like hate to once again go back to Alabama, Georgia, but you have the expectation of being a national champion. You know, when you're held to that, you can either be that or not that. With Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin, they're still trying to prove that, you know, but until you've really done it and I've really seen it, you know, this is a team that still has not beaten Alabama. You know, this is a team that still has not beaten Georgia. So at the end of the day, this is still the same team we've always seen. We just mentally wanted to change them. We're seeing a version of them in our minds that may not exist.
Not a 12-team playoff era killer,
right?
Obviously. When was the last time that a team lost to Kentucky and won a national championship? You should know this.
LSU, 2007.
Yes, sir. So who knows?
You love to give me the most specific war flashbacks. I genuinely appreciate that about you because I'm like, I forgot about that game.
We just threw that one there just for you. All right.
Yeah.
Let's talk Oklahoma and Auburn, Will.
Yeah. But really quick, I'm just really happy for Stoops. I just want to say that again. Good for him. Just we could even a little bit more positive about Kentucky. I mean, what do we think about them this year? They good?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think Kentucky has shown you this thus far. Like even if they're 7-5, it's a team that if you're expecting a certain type of matchup for 60 minutes and you're expecting, you know, not necessarily to have to pull out the big guns from a scheme standpoint, like I think you could have another thing coming. They have shown at this point of the season that they can play with anyone. They did not play with South Carolina. I'm not saying that, but when you do that back-to-back against Georgia and Ole Miss, two very popular picks to be able to make it to the SEC championship, Kentucky is showing that they have this ability to be able to hang with teams that previously we did not think that they could hang with. And that's the positive for Kentucky. Does this mean that they're all of a sudden going to like, oh my God, they're going to snap into play and they're actually going to live up to the Matt Jones 9-3 path? No, I don't think so. I think they still have too many issues throwing the football specifically, but I think that they're a team that, man, like get your lunch pail ready to go. Get your hard hat on. This is not a fun team. This is all the
cliche things. You better have your aspirin if you're playing Mark Stoops.
You better.
Yeah. So this doesn't. I mean, they're at Tennessee. They're at Texas. It doesn't make you think it'd be either of those teams, but they're probably compete and they're like at least like a 8-ish win team.
They're an any given Saturday team.
Yep.
That's what they are at this point. I don't know that they're an 8-win team. I think they still have flaws on the offensive side of the ball, despite the fact that it was easily the best game that Bush Hamden has schemed up, like easily. And I do think that there could be some more tough times ahead in that area. But when you've got a defensive front as good as what Kentucky's got, and they're trusting what Brad White and Mark Stoops are doing, man, they're not gonna be a fun team to play. Absolutely not.
A little better than we thought. Probably still going to lose those two big matchups. Maybe one more weird one, but not a disaster that we thought it was at South Carolina. So big deal for them. Anyway.
Correct. All right, let's talk Oklahoma and Auburn, Will.
Please.
Let's pull up the Hugh Freeze buyout numbers.
Let's do it. I'm so excited. This one's going to run long today. We just know it because it's on Saturday. Yeah, I mean, this is just...
Apologies if you don't like an hour and 40 minute recap pod, but
I got Saints Falcons to watch after this. So look, I promise you, but this is worth it. All right, if I'm waiting for that.
I've got a sick child to take care of, so yeah.
True.
Yeah.
You kind of got me there.
Different priorities. I looked this up, of course, because as promised in the preview pod, we weren't going to do this until the time called for it.
Yep.
Chris Vanini pointed out before Freeze actually coached the game at Auburn that they were still on the hook at that time. This is April of 23. So this is before Hugh Freeze, start year one. They were still on the hook for about $37 million for Gus and Harsin.
He about to get fired too.
I don't know that Gus is about to get fired. The Colorado game was bad.
They got smoked. Anyway.
He could work for free as far as I'm concerned. It's 75% of Freeze's remaining contract is what he would be owed for that buyout, which Freeze is paid $6.5 million annually, but it's a bit backloaded. $22.1 million. That's our number. That is the Hugh Freeze buyout. Yeah. We have to ask that at this point because holy cow, what a train wreck way to blow a football game. Blow a football game that you had every business winning. You did. You really did. And when you're up 11 with 9 minutes left in the fourth quarter at home against a true freshman in his first career start who is without his top 5 receivers.
Is what?
You got to win that football game. You have to.
I don't even feel bad about picking Auburn because the way they lost this game was so shockingly bad. I'm just like,
even for everything that Auburn has seen in the life of Auburn, that's the only way to say it. The stunned silence of how this played out was something that was very, very telling. Freeze has the ball in plus territory in up 11 in this game with I think it was 10 minutes left. And then he decides that his kicker, Towns McGee,
they were calling him Towns Magoo, which feels entirely too made up.
That's not a real name. There's no way.
Towns Magoo.
How does Auburn always have a kicker with a made up name? That's what I'd like to know. Anyway, like Bert Auburn, the Texas kicker. But this guy did not make a kick from 27 and 31 earlier. He had 2 chances to make it from that distance earlier because there was a penalty that negated. And then he still could make it. And Freeze decides, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to send this kid out to see if he can make a 51-yarder. Spoiler alert, he did not make the 51-yarder. Terrible. Not even close. Sorry, Pat McAfee. Am I not allowed to criticize a kicker on scholarship for horribly missing a kick and for a coach, some reason having faith in him to make that kick?
I can't even blame what they put that poor kid through, man. The weird fire snap field goal that's I'm like,
weird.
Auburn, usually a special team's pretty well figured out to your point. And I'm like, okay, you kind of like your kicker. No, they were like, this guy's new. He goes out there. They almost can't get the snap off. There's a weird penalty. It's like a 27-yarder or something.
Yeah, and then it turns into a 31.
Yeah, he misses it twice.
Or it was a 31 and then it turned into a 27, I think.
27,
there was
exactly,
an offsides.
Yeah. Exactly, yeah. And I'm like, how do you, this poor kid was just set up to fail because you gave him a shot at a harder one, but it was out of rhythm, and then you gave it to him again, and it's and then to your point, this kid went 0 for 3 on field goals, and almost none of them were his fault, if that makes sense.
When he got sent out for the 51-yarder, I'm like, are they about to hard count from a field goal formation? Certainly you can't kick this. What?
I'm with you, I can't, but this is actually the least I blame the kicker for missing field goals. So this is a grown man. This is a classic Hugh Freeze where it's I want to blame the grown man. He's making all this money, and why is he? What the fact that they ran a hitch route and gave Peyton Thorne the opportunity to check that ball down on third down, going into half, and you're like, oh my God, they don't have any timeouts. Peyton Thorne's going to be a check down Charlie here, get them 2 yards, and they're like, what do we do? What do we do?
Horrible management.
That was underratedly there were lots of funny bad parts for Auburn here, and again, I get it, guys. Let's turn the chapter on this one, but that was excruciating.
A lot of excruciating moments when you look back on this game that Auburn will absolutely want to have back. But so after that missed kick attempt, which I guess that's what we'll call it, poor coaching decision, immediately Michael Hawkins Jr. takes over and throws a dime to J.J. Hester, a guy that did not have a catch this season, okay? And it's a touchdown drive to be able to make it a 21-16 game, and then don't you know it, Peyton Thorne happened. Peyton Thorne. That pick six was so bad. So bad. Credit the Oklahoma defense. Credit Kip Lewis for not giving up on that game. Again, in the do we still give a crap index, you had to throw the Oklahoma defense in there with how many times they've been asked to go out on the field after their offense this season could muster a touchdown drive. So credit them for actually having their wits about them to still be focused and still not be too deterred by the fact that up to that point, Peyton Thorne had a pretty solid day. He really had.
So I was about to say this. Is this an all-time misleading box score game? Because I felt so much frustration watching Peyton Thorne, but I look at his box score. This gentleman had almost 340.
Hit the chunk place. Yeah, Keandre Lamar-Smith. Yeah.
But I felt despite what is probably his best game in Auburn.
Nah, if we're weighing competition, it's a little bit different. I think the Arkansas game last year, he was particularly good. It just depends on how we're talking about it relative to competition. If you're talking about like most impressive, then maybe there's a conversation to be had there. But
yeah,
he did all right. I mean, it was like for what the expectations were coming into this game with him getting a start again.
Yeah,
I think he certainly passed low expectations up until the fourth quarter when Peyton Thorne happened.
That's what I was going to say. It's like you look at this box. Okay, do you feel like Hawkins outplayed him? I guess is a better question.
Yeah, because the turnovers. Like
the turnover.
Oh,
no, because he didn't lose the fumble. So like that's what I was gonna say. Is like this is the most confusing box score game I've ever seen with two quarterbacks. Because you look at this, dude had 340, 3 tutties, 1 pick. You're like, oh, okay, how bad could that be? The worst pick you could possibly throw. That actually, like, literally one of the worst picks ever. Where I'm like, all you have to do here is not.
And then don't you know it? And even at the end, like some of the hits that he was taking with the pressures that Venables was dialing up, where you have like
he can't read the defense, bro. He's taking too long back there, and this Oklahoma, like say what you will, like their pass rushers, I think were pretty, like their pressure was at least pretty solid. I don't know about this Oklahoma defense overall, like when you're getting carved up by Peyton Thorne like that, but at the same time, like man, they were just on his butt. And at the end of the game, it was like, bro, just run, like please, like when it got into these big moments, it was like stop throwing the ball, and it's crazy to think this is a ceiling to me. Like this is as well as you could play in a game.
Yeah.
That's what's scary. It's like this is as well as he could play, and it was still not that good of a game if you watched it with your eyeballs. And when he needed to do nothing, he couldn't do nothing.
Well, Auburn has lost 3 pre-October home games for the first time in program history. Yeah, I went back year by year and looked up that stat because I had to know. And I got back to the 1910s, and then I stopped because I realized that they weren't playing 3 pre-October games. They were playing like 1 pre-October game. So it's kind of pointless to keep going.
Ever.
Yeah.
In the history of Auburn football, we had a COVID year and everything. Every weird thing that's happened in college football.
Late start that year.
I know, but like we had world wars in there. Still didn't do this.
3 pre-October home losses for Auburn. 2 not world beaters. It'd be one thing if it was like, oh, they played, they played Georgia.
Clemson, that conference, and like, oh, they started off with like weird, And
they played like Georgia, like another team in non-conference that they maybe weren't supposed to beat, and then they like lost a game that they weren't supposed to win, or they lost a game that they were supposed to win. Cal, Arkansas, and a true freshman in his first career start who didn't have his top 5 receivers and was looking at an 11-point deficit in the fourth quarter. So bad. So bad. Auburn just can't get out of its own way in anything because I thought it was mostly a solid game. And then it reminded us this is a program that still doesn't know how to win football games. 3 consecutive losing seasons, staring at a 4th consecutive losing season that could very much be on the way. Upcoming schedule, Will.
Mm-hmm.
Auburn will be at Georgia next week, a place that they haven't won in nearly 2 decades. So that's not good. At Mizzou. TBD on that. We're going to find out a lot about Mizzou over the course of the next month. And then at Kentucky, who we just got finished talking about. They'll make life hell. Right, yeah.
That's Peyton Thorne is exactly who Mark Stoops wants to see.
0 home games now for Auburn until November. Maybe that's a good thing because Jordan-Hare can't save this team. Whatever magic Jordan-Hare has had in years past, I'm throwing that out the window. Like there is none of that to be had with this team. And
let me stop you right there because you're exactly right. You know what's so crazy? Brian Harsin wins this game.
I don't know if I'm willing to go that far.
No, listen to me. Brian Harsin had Alabama in 2 OT with TJ Finley. Like, because you got to count for at least 1
He didn't win that game. He didn't win that game, though.
I'm telling you, I'm talking about Bryce Young, bro. This is a horrible football. Like, in terms of getting close and just like whatever, like, he's not getting close. That's what I'm trying to say. Like it has gotten progressively worse kind of in these matchups because I think that effect is still there, right? Like I talked about it, like the home field environment is very real. There was a moment where they were looking up and they were 21-7. Then Hugh Freeze kept making decisions. That's what I'm saying. I think that this, if anything, proves the magic of Jordan-Hare Stadium because they were still able to like that environment was so hard to win in. It really took Hugh Freeze just physically like loading the revolver and shooting his own team because like it was insane the amount of bad decisions they made. It was like I feel like a average coach, that's what's so scary to me, a below average coach could have won this game. And even like last week, you look at the Arkansas game, it's like these are games that an average replacement level coach could win at Auburn because of the talent level, because of like just the environment, like the way that this place has always been for my entire life. Like you're entering scary territory here as an Auburn fan because these coaches that you would, okay, well, this guy's not any good. We got to get rid of Gus. Okay, Harsin, he's not a fit. He's not a cultural fit. We got to get him out of here. Okay, Hugh Freeze, cultural fit. I don't know how it gets worse than this from Auburn. And I'm scared for them because of that reason, because I assume their floor was so high, where it's like, oh, you're in the same state as the University of Alabama. You have to play Georgia now, like most years or whatever. Like your ceiling can be kind of high, but when you get those, or it can be kind of low, but once you get those games at home, when you get the Georgia and the Alabama game at home, you could work with something. Now it's like, oh, you can't even win at home. And that was Auburn. That was their floor. That was as bad as they could have possibly been, was have 1 or 2 shocking home wins every year.
I don't know where Auburn goes to find answers, and that is a big, big problem for Hugh Freeze. People forget Brian Harsin got until Halloween in year 2. Hugh Freeze is going to get to Halloween, I think. Beyond that, man, ugly. Ugly. All right, let's talk Oklahoma.
Yeah.
We got to put some respect on Michael Hawkins Jr., the Brent Venables defense. Play of the game is obviously the pick 6 by Kip Lewis, of course, but that throw to J.J. Hester was just so phenomenal. And to that point, 0 drives after Michael Hawkins found a seam, hit the Jets with that 4.4 speed for that opening drive touchdown. Again, the fact that he was able to trust a guy that hadn't caught a pass all year and to be able to deliver in that spot, that sets up the touchdown. Venables said afterwards that Oklahoma just simply had not had an explosive play like that all year. Understatement. Oklahoma had 5 passing plays of 20 yards all season coming into that game, bottom 10 nationally. Hawkins just apparently lives for the fourth quarter, and that's a really good thing for a team that still has flaws offensively. There's no doubt about it, but like I was really impressed by the poise that he showed down the stretch, and I think that's going to keep him locked into that starter role. And it allows us to really quickly map out Jackson Arnold portal destinations. FSU was your suggestion. Yeah.
Yep.
Oklahoma State would be fun. Replace the 35-year-old Alan Bowman. Just go.
Well, he's actually set up an HOA in the quarterback room, so now you got to pay dues. He's so
yeah. What's the HOA in that quarterback room?
Can't move it. Actually, he won't let you take his job. It's against regulations.
Yeah, that's true. Colorado. Sure, off to the NFL. Just saying, throwing it out there. We'll save that for another time. Oklahoma's defense, I think, has shown a lot of grit early on, and they need to get some credit because trust in the scheme got them that pick 6. And for a group that I think will play in a lot of close games this year, I think that's really big. Like, think of the alternative that was staring Brent Venables in the face. 0-2 in SEC play. You're going into that bye week, which would feel really long. All the questions of, are you SEC ready? And then number 1 Texas with a healthy Quinn Ewers, albeit one that Oklahoma beat last year. That's the team that'd be waiting for you on the other side of that. You'd be staring very likely at potentially an 0-3 start to SEC play. And instead, you find your offensive identity. You bounce back after a humbling SEC debut against Tennessee, and you win a game that, honestly, like in this conference, you got to steal one every once in a while. Oklahoma stole that, and Brent Venables, man, that ride home probably felt a whole lot better than it could have.
Yeah, I'm so fascinated by Oklahoma as well. Like, I just, again, to your point, very always happy to have the win. Always, especially like SEC, first SEC win in conference in program history. Like, huge deal. Like, they prove they belong. They prove they could punch back. I do think giving up 500 yards to Peyton Thorne's a little bit rough. 26 first downs. Like, I do like the defense responded when it mattered. But like I said, I think Peyton Thorne also is Peyton Thorne and made the worst possible mistake he got. Like, if he made a slightly less terrible mistake, they still, would have been in a good position. So I'm very interested by this Oklahoma team. I think that there's a lot to like. Like, when you talk about, they have a lot of leadership on defense. They do. It feels like they do kind of have that dog in them. And that's something that weirdly Venables teams have had, even though they've been in so many close games or like comfortable in close games. If that makes sense. But Oklahoma's fan base that really has not witnessed a lot of close games over the years. So I don't know. That's a good thing in the SEC play. It's a good thing when you can get your recruits in and start to build on that. Start to remain a little bit worried, or I continue to be worried about this Oklahoma team, as they host or as they play Texas pretty soon here after a bye. So yeah, I think a lot is still ahead of them, but there are some things to work out during this bye. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah, maybe a team that can keep its head afloat in SEC play. I think the upside is still really limited with their personnel on the offensive side of the ball. It's very limited. I'm not
Yeah.
expecting them. I'd be stunned if Oklahoma got back into the top 10 or something like that at any point this season. But at the same time, great response. Just find a way. And they found a way to be able to win that one. All right. Arkansas, Texas A&M. Only an idiot would assume that Texas A&M would run out of juice against Arkansas in that building. I am that idiot. We are those idiots because you flip-flopped.
I flip-flopped. And, dude, I told you, this is exactly what I said off air. I was like, I switched off of the Auburn game because I saw Taylor Green taking the field for a potential game-winning drive. Of course, I then had to go back and watch the pick six because they happened at the exact same time. But I was so ready for Taylor Green magic. And, buddy, did we see Taylor Green magic?
Depends how you define magic. Not in the good sense.
He's an impact player, Connor. That's why I love Taylor Green.
Yes, he is impacting it in a variety of ways. Not
the
always
Marcus Smart of college football.
Yeah, a little bit. Arkansas just can't find those breaks down the stretch. I mean, in this game specifically, the Southwest Classic, but 0 touchdowns for the Hogs after the first quarter. Only 1 touchdown after that opening series for Arkansas. I thought Mike Elko did a really good job dialing up looks to be able to put Taylor Green in some awkward spots. The Nick Scorton forced fumble to be able to put the game away was obviously huge. 3 Arkansas turnovers. Taylor Green is so fun, but the turnovers are just maddening. Maddening. Like bad turnovers. He drifts to his right so casually. Yeah, if you're not an Arkansas fan, they're funny, but
brother, I rooted for Jaden Daniels. I know exactly what these feel. That Ole Miss fumble, I was like,
nah, I mean, I think it's a little bit different because some of the things that he does of like throwing back across his body, you get away with in the Mountain West. You don't get away with in the SEC. Here's my question, because it's very easy to point at the performance of Taylor Green and say he struggled on that stage, and a defensive-minded head coach got the better of him, and that's exactly what played out. But in what world should DeQuinton Jackson have only gotten 10 carries in that game?
True.
What are they doing? Like that's on Bobby Petrino. It is. Can't have the SEC's leading rusher turned into a second fiddle player unless he was hurt and we didn't know about it. And I understand the 10 penalties that Arkansas had didn't necessarily set them up well. Sometimes you could look back at the box score and you're like, why did this guy only have this amount of work when the game flow was like this? Like, well, when they're starting off, 1st and 20, and then it's like 2nd and 18, it's kind of tough to be able to run the football. But still, like, A&M entered this game 82nd in yards per carry allowed. And instead of really feeding into that with Jackson, which I thought was going to be the MO, Arkansas kind of let those A&M edge rushers pin their ears back, and they won that battle. For Arkansas' sake, a very, very good thing that they are not playing this game at AT&T Stadium anymore. Very good thing. I don't think anybody's going to miss that building from that fan base one bit. No trip to Dallas this year? Oh, darn.
Oh, no.
We'll make the best of it. But for A&M, nice little response after that Notre Dame loss. Really nice little response because 4 in a row they've won. They're 2-0 in SEC play in games that were played away from home. No Connor Wigman, still out with the AC joint. He wasn't in uniform for this one. Did Marcel Reed do enough to win this job? That was something that we talked about coming into this. I said in the preview pod, it was sort of like a do or die game for that. I'm a little bit torn because
I still think no. You think he did?
Well, here's the thing. I'm trying to get into the mind of. I'm trying to get out of my mindset. I'm trying to get into Elko's mindset because that's the only thing that matters, right?
Fair.
And if he's a defensive-minded head coach, and if Colin Klein, as a first-year OC, is trying to show that these run concepts are effective, and he wants to recruit to that, and we always talk about wanting to establish an offensive identity, does Marcel Reed give you the best chance to be able to do that? I think that there will be a favorable argument for him, despite the fact that I love Connor Wigman. I do. I have sold some stock. I have not sold all stock. Okay. I think he might be the starter moving forward. I don't say that with a lot of confidence. I don't. And I think the passing game is certainly not at the level that you'd hope it would be. And maybe that'll hurt them in some of these games against better competition. Because I keep going back to what would Marcel Reed have looked like against Notre Dame in 3rd and 8. I wouldn't have felt good about him in that spot. I don't think he's shown enough as a passer to say definitively, yes, you have to turn the keys over to him. But what I think he deserves credit for is not making some of the mistakes that we see from a guy with much more experience, Taylor Green. Seriously, look at those two guys lined up. And you're like, one is a redshirt freshman and one has been in college football for, I think it's year 4 for Taylor Green. Yeah, I think it's year 4. But yeah, like I don't know. It's not gonna stun me if Mike Elko looks at this situation and says, I'm gonna stick with Marcel Reed. I'm gonna stick with the hot hand. I'm gonna trust that I'm a year one guy. And this is I'd rather just play ball control football and not necessarily feel like I have to start Wigman just because he's the former 5-star. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I love the comparison there, right? So, I'm an apprentice in the art of being concise, but if I had done this a little bit better in the preview, what I would have said was this is a very interesting matchup because we have two great defensive ends, right, against two potentially mobile quarterbacks. Now, in this situation, I mean, Landon Jackson, oh, man. I mean, that guy was nasty, right? I mean, and so at the end of the day, and it's funny because him and Scorton were going back and forth, and you could argue that Jackson had the better day until the final play, right?
Sure.
And that was a heavyweight fight, and this is so rare that we saw such a mirror of these two teams, both who have, which would be if they had their druthers quarterbacks that had a little bit of that dual threat, both of whom were neutralized. You know what I'm saying? And what happens then, right? Taylor Green making Nick Scorton the player of the game. Marcel Reed didn't do enough to do that, obviously. You know what I'm saying? Like he in terms of like in a positive way, like he didn't make enough risks. He didn't lose the game for Texas A&M, which exactly to your point is what you would like as a defensive minded head coach. That being said, I think that this is a team that, you know, in the preseason I talked about who are the athletes, you know, who are the game changers. I think despite that, they have found a way to find a pretty productive rushing attack. That I think Le'Veon Moss had a really good game.
He did.
You know, that when I was able to glance over there, he was crushing it every time I saw him. And so that being said, I don't think their running attack is really the issue. I think that, man, it's just so wild because like I've seen the back and forth with Wigman. It's funny that we are kind of on not opposite sides, but or like kind of seeing a little bit different here because I was a little bit lower than you were on him initially, and now I'm looking at him like, look, man, if you don't have these game-breaking receivers, I feel like you've got to have a quarterback who can throw guys open.
And it's like Oklahoma. Like what we talk about with Oklahoma, like Oklahoma doesn't have those guys right now. So like they have to turn to a guy like Michael Hawkins. Noah Thomas looked really good in this game. Is he that is he going to be that game-breaking receiver for them?
Right.
I don't know. I don't know that I can get there yet, but like how much are you playing to your personnel with a decision like that? You know?
Well, no, that's what I'm saying though. In their situation, I think Wigman can throw guys open. Like I think he could run more of the playbook. I think that instead of having because like that's the difference to me between like their situation is that their running game I think is going to be fine regardless because we didn't see Marshall Reed be that much. It was a threat technically, but he was contained, right? So I think at the end of the day, we're not seeing like a Notre Dame style offense that needs to have their quarterback run the ball. Or like if they couldn't run the ball, they were like toast, like with their quarterback, and he broke through kind of at the end of that game, right? But point being, like I think this offense you'd rather do both, right? But under Colin Klein in first year, you kind of have to pick one. I think you're so right about the turnovers, man. This is going to be a really, really, really interesting battle because you would think that the veteran quarterback and Wigman would take care of the ball better. But yeah, I do see your point here, man, with Reed. So I think that's what it is. I think they're going to give Wigman a little bit more of a shot here. Let me like pull up their schedule really quick to see.
I got it right here.
They got Mizzou next.
Yeah, home against Mizzou and then a bye week.
A team that if you don't turn the ball over, you could beat them.
You very like. I'll be very interested to see like what that line ends up being. But yeah, I mean, you're home against Mizzou, then you have a bye week, and then at Mississippi State, then home against LSU. You'd like to get this squared away where it's not a question week to week. And obviously,
no scary defenses coming up, I think is what we're seeing here.
Yeah, exactly. No scary defenses coming up. That's kind of the good news. Mizzou's defense has definitely surpassed my preseason expectations, and I think Corey Batoon deserves credit for it. But I don't think it's as good as last year's unit. I don't. Right. We'll see how that plays out. But if you can navigate this right, if you're Mike Elko, and I think this is his mindset. How do I get to 6-1 with playoff hopes on the table for a late October game at home against LSU? That's how you're probably trying to envision this scenario of like what that would mean year one, instead of having these teams that for the last 3 seasons now for A&M, that's been off the table so early. And some of these crowds, like we always go back to the UMass crowd that they had in that game where 12 people were there and it was pouring and Don Brown is in a raincoat. Ryan Bamford was probably there actually orchestrating the rain that was coming down.
Like the Joker, he was sitting in the press box hitting his rain button.
For sure. But like some of these images are so important in these optics of like, can you get to that place and navigate this the right way without losing the locker room. Some of the things that you hear said about Marcel Reed, like I know Nick Scorton was really complimentary of him, of Reed, and like you kind of wonder how much has that guy won over the locker room? Are guys like starting to really believe in him with the fact that like you're winning these games? Like these are all things that factor into the equation that Mike Elko has not really had to deal with a whole lot during his time as a head coach. Obviously, Riley Leonard, when he was healthy, was going to be the guy at Duke. And then you have to navigate what it looks like when he gets hurt. But, these are the things that we ask of you when you're a defensive-minded head coach. How do you handle these situations? And Mike Elko has the situation in front of him. All right. Let's talk about game of the day. Mississippi State and Texas. A game that, like, let's be honest, it's on the multi-view. You're watching Arch.
My brain was like at negative capacity trying to follow this game. The other two were on. I was like, please take care of it. But like, I can't handle another upset today. Please.
Yeah. Texas and Arch Manning are in the SEC win column. That's the good news for them. We were a few minutes away from this game forcing us into some uncomfortable conversations about Texas. Like we really were. And I was like, all right, like for the sake of my viewing with how crazy things were playing out in the afternoon, you're like, I don't know if I can handle 3 chaotic games going on at the same time. We need to figure this out. And I'm not saying like I'm sitting there rooting for Texas or anything like that, but I was just kind of like, all right, you kind of divide up your attention very specifically.
Can one of you please figure this out? Like one of you 6 teams start playing well right now.
Right, exactly. This was looking like it was about to be a 1-score game going into the fourth quarter because Texas couldn't run the ball against Mississippi State. Like really could not run the ball. But then Arch hits the Jets. He turns the corner. He sets up a 1-yard touchdown on a play that I thought he got robbed of a touchdown on that dive. I don't know why they like took that off the board. Even he said afterwards, he's like, yeah, I thought I was in. It's like, I did too. I would agree with you. Nonetheless, I thought he was effective. I thought he was confident. Kind of worked for Texas that it struggled so much to run the football. Like they had, I think, 10 rushing yards in the first half of this game, which was just truly stunning. And the fact that it ends up working out well for you, big picture, to be able to have Arch playing in a 1-score SEC game in the second half, valuable reps for him, given the injury history of Quinn Ewers, all that stuff. Arch looks capable. He looks comfortable. I love that nothing seems tense with him. I love that he doesn't really force the action that much for a guy at this stage of his career. I like that he's chopping it up with Ewers on the sideline. I already talked about how much it kind of like speaks to his character as like a down-to-earth guy, that he's got all these handshakes with his teammates. Like those are all positives. This could be Arch's team at another point this season. Okay. Like I think everybody acknowledges that because of the situation with Ewers. But the next time that we see Texas for the Red River rivalry, it'll be Quinn Ewers' team. As long as he is healthy, obviously, that will be the case. I'm not really concerned about Texas. And I think that there are elements.
This is like the inverse of the last one. Sorry, like this is fully a joke. I'm kidding. But it's like, well, they got to go to Arch here because they can't get the crowd going because he's actually effective as a rusher.
Yeah. No, like they got things going with Trey Wisner late. Jaden Blue gets benched in this game because he had 2 fumbles in this one.
That's so funny as a coach too. It's like you gotta sit down. It's like are you going in, coach? who we putting in? The water boy? All right, good luck. Yeah. You got me.
And I think Sark is going to do that at times this year because of the backfield depth. He's just going to be like, look, I'm not trying to sit here and worry about like if Jaden Blue gets like 1,300 yards or 1,400 yards. Like we got to just manage the situation as best as possible. And for whatever reason, like he wasn't in the right headspace. I think he will have much better days ahead. I mean, he had 25 carries in the game last week, but between those 2 fumbles and then there was like a drop deep ball that Arch just put, I mean, just in a bucket that should have been 6. It kind of changed the complexion of that first half. And I'll give Mississippi State credit. I like the fight that we saw from that defense after they just got run over by Florida. Michael Van Buren against that Texas defense. They've
also got a Booth, so you got to watch him from range.
Of course. What does that mean?
Like John Wilkes Booth.
Oh, we're going John Wilkes.
Look, they're assembling, the Justice League of like American patriots. Okay.
Do we need? Is there an Oswald on this team?
Maybe Booth isn't a patriot. Maybe I said that wrong. Historical figures in American.
Is there a Hinckley on this team?
I don't want to be associated with the works of John Wilkes Booth, but I that's a goofy, fun like team that they all have these goofy names and they're just out here like in a rock fight, kind of with Texas weirdly. And you're just like, guys, what's going on?
Who was the guy that tried to assassinate McKinley? Blanking on that one. We don't need to talk about presidential assassination attempts. A little too real lately.
Jimmy Carter is the only name you need to know. He was the happy president for today. That's the only historical figure.
Exactly. But yeah, this this game for Texas was about getting through, trying to be as healthy as possible going into the bye week, and not necessarily playing in a 60-minute football game for that. Mission accomplished, and I don't necessarily know that there's a whole lot else to pick apart with Texas.
Yeah, I mean, Texas is such a objectively kind of like funny team too, right? Because it's like they have everything, but it's like the Moneyball meme where it's like, all right, I've got the perfect college football team for you. They just cannot field a running back. It's like if they just had like base level like Jam Miller, like they would just be so good. Like he's good at dumping on them, but if they just had like a guy that they could just hand the ball to, because I don't think like their line's pretty good. Like it's not like they have like some weird like they're not running the T formation 3 times in a row. Their play calling is good. It's just like you guys really are just your running back position has gone from this beautiful like Garden of Eden to like you just you think you found your 4th string guy, he fumbles twice, and now what's
I think they have enough. I think they have enough. Blue would have been 2nd string coming into this year. Like,
of course, yeah.
I think he's still a really good player. I think Wisner is a guy that kind of gives them a nice little complimentary piece. He's a bit smaller, a bit shiftier out of the backfield, but no, I'm not worried. I wouldn't be worried about Texas. I think that they're still in position to do everything that they set out to with a favorable schedule. And if this game had gone to a 60-minute game, though, I tweeted this out. Maybe we just don't do previews anymore. Maybe we just spin a wheel. Like, oh, this is how this game will play out. Let's just do that. If Mississippi State was going to play in a 60-minute game with the number 1 team in college football, but that didn't end up happening.
Yeah, and all I'm going with that is like, we've seen these rock fight in a phone booth games still happen in the SEC, right? Georgia to Kentucky, like this is, and we've seen Kentucky play this with Ole Miss too. Not just when Kentucky's involved, but we've seen these like lower scoring games. And so, point being, it's like I hate that for Texas. Legitimately, a team that has been so. I'm going to be real, man. It feels like Texas has been given a lot of chances they didn't deserve over the last 15 years. And now you're looking at a Texas team that's number 1. It's like, dang, man, your quarterback's hurt. You got like 2, 3 running backs hurt. Like, it's almost like you guys are getting the short end of the stick here. And like, I find myself rooting for them, which is kind of weird because they've always been like the team that's overhyped. So
that's Sark, I think.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it too is like, I don't even like Sark. You know what I'm saying? Like, I like his special teams coach who was dating the stripper with the monkey. I think that was funny.
Allegedly.
Outside of that,
yeah.
They were like married or something. Anyway, so point being, like, I think that they like. I'm looking at this Texas team, just going like, oh man, like you guys got like obviously, for the story, you want Mississippi State to play well, you want it to be like kind of a close game, even though so much is going on. But at the same time, it's like, dang, like this Texas team is kind of like facing adversity and they're scrappy, and it's not like self-created. It's not like some scandal. It's like, no, like injuries just kind of happen, and it sucks, and it's almost like humanizing them in a way that they were going to be like this big gleaming. And I'm sure they'll find a way, right? Like we'll see Bevo attack another beautiful mascot or something.
We better not.
Yeah, they kept him away from the human mascot at Mississippi State. Smart move. Like I'm sure Texas will do something to show their butts, for lack of a better term. But so far, this has been a gritty, cool, fun team, and they just keep getting injuries. So all I'm saying with that is, if they get in one of these weird rock fight games, I'm gonna be like, oh man, I wish they had, their running back. I wish they had a ground game they can lean on, because I don't really want to see Arch Manning read option with Wisner. Like, good for them, but that's just it's tough that could be something that cost them when it has nothing to do. It's not their fault. They shouldn't have 6 running backs on staff.
I'm just glad that we didn't see another Bevo Bulldog incident.
Exactly. That's what we should be happy for.
That's the biggest one. All right, let's close with some post-September Heisman watch.
Mm-hmm.
I realize like overreaction, proper reaction for like mid-season's a little bit tougher. Maybe we'll get back into it, but I kind of wanted to be able to do this to kind of handicap the Heisman conversation going into October, which take this for what it is. It's very, very early, but I think there's a pretty clear top 4 right now in no particular order. I think Jalen Milroe, Ashton Genty, Boise State running back, who's just been ridiculous, averaging like 11 yards per carry.
Drafted in our draft.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Because
that's not I think he was already cooking by that point.
No, I mean, like a group of 5 running back winning the Heisman Trophy would still be an absurd thing. And there are
that's the other, that's the other part of it, is that he'd have to have like just an insane season. But that's
continue like basically.
He immediately pretty much already did. Yeah, that's nuts.
And then Travis Hunter and Cam Ward. That would be like the top 4 right now, in my opinion, in terms of the odds. And I don't know if the odds are really going to reflect that, but that's just based on how I would view this. And it doesn't mean that there are guys that aren't on the table. But can I ask something? Because I've been trying to think about this the last couple of weeks. Who actually is the anti-Travis Hunter crowd? Because I don't know if they actually exist, or if it's just people saying that he won't get the love that he needs if Colorado doesn't win enough games. Like, I don't know if there are people out there who are speaking against what he's doing. And by the way, what he did on Saturday here in my neck of the woods in Orlando was just ridiculous once again. And if I had to talk about that guy every single recap pod, I don't know. This is the Shohei Ohtani of college football. Like there's no other way to describe it. It's insane. It's absolutely insane. But like, I don't know. I don't really hear those people. I don't hear from these people like, well, Colorado's going to have to go 8-4. It's like, where are you? I don't know. The last two Heisman winners were from non-playoff teams. And I think anyone with half a brain can acknowledge that what he's doing for his team's success at Colorado is different than anything in college football. So I don't know. Like, I find myself wondering that. I'm just not hearing the Travis Hunter skepticism. I'm hearing everybody acknowledge that this is incredible. And this is easily one of the best few players in college football, maybe the single best player in college football.
Yeah, this has gone this is such a wide open season. This is so this would have been a wide open season in like the BCS era, honestly, because like we just talked about some of the stuff with Texas, like they were just in a fight with Mississippi State. Like at the end of the day, we don't confidently know what's going to happen between Texas, Ole Miss, and Georgia. I won't pretend to until we get close to those games, and not that I will confidently even know it then because so much changes. But like, there's not like a Georgia Michigan situation where it's just like all year. So yeah, point being, like for me, like when we did the non QB Heisman, it was really just like the anti-Colorado crowd, right? So if you're anti-Deion, if you're anti-Colorado, I'm a guy who's been more pro-Deion than I would say probably 80% of the people listed right now. Like, I just think he's cool. I think he just looks cool. Like him on the side. What they didn't realize this weekend, what I realized quickly, is that Deion Sanders actually hates the cold. If you look at all the places he's been, played, and lived in his life, never actually been in the cold. So he's in Colorado. Where you see him in Colorado, he's bundled up like a South Park character, like overdressed for how like he's upset. He's from Florida, or I don't know if he's from Florida originally. He played
originally from Florida, and then he's been living in Texas, I think, for a long time. Yeah.
Yep. See, I knew he was from Florida anyway, but he obviously played at FSU. And I looked up, I was like, oh man, he's in Orlando. He's comfy. He's got his skin tight, like Under Armour shirt on. He's got glasses on the sides of his face, big gold chain. I'm like, he's gonna smack Gus up today. So yeah, point being, like, I think Colorado might actually be at least solid this year to the point where they're not embarrassing. I think that was the issue, was people taking out frustration on Deion, on Travis Hunter, as they did in the Colorado State game last year, and also him checking himself out. But but if Colorado continues to not embarrass themselves, which they've not embarrassed themselves this year, credit to them. I've never seen so far a team that has like proven the haters wrong in the way that they have, because it looked like they were going to win 1 or 2 games. If you followed the media coverage of them, the recruiting was a mess, all this different stuff. They get in there and they're just cooking. We have kind of forgotten that Shador went undefeated too in our quarterback draft because we just didn't know.
Undrafted,
undrafted, undefeated. They we didn't know if he'd be protected. We know about the O-line, but they've answered, and Gus Malzahn will expose you. One thing about him, like just like he did with TCU last week. So yeah, point being, I think Travis Hunter's a super duper duper fun player, and even if you don't like Colorado, don't be a hater. Like, just get that away from your appreciation of one of the greatest players we've seen.
I wouldn't eliminate Carson Beck. I wouldn't eliminate Jackson Dart just because they had bad Saturdays. Carson Beck's
up out of here, brother.
Carson Beck's going to be in a tough spot just because, like, when you have that side by side with Milroe, you're probably not going to win that argument unless, of course, you get a rematch in the SEC championship.
Mind you. That's the thing, because Milroe got kind of jumped him last year, and then we all kind of went back and said, he's better than Milroe, he's better than Milroe. Boom, no, he's not.
Yeah. Nico, I think, is still part of this conversation as well. True freshman receivers, Ryan Williams, Jeremiah Smith, man, they might just make us rethink how we view freshman receivers at this level to be able to compete for an award like that. I'm not saying they're going to win the Heisman or anything like that, or even get to New York, but holy cow! If they're not on the short list of best players in college football so far, I don't know who is. But and then Trey Harris is yet to be stopped. Of course, some people are pointing out the fact that he's got more receiving yards of any Power 5 player pre-October than anybody in the playoff era. I'm the one pointing that out. But that's how I would view the situation early on. Anyway, All right, that's pod. That was a doozy, Will. That was a doozy. If you haven't, please leave us a 5-star review. Subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch every single episode of the Saturday Down South podcast. Follow us on Twitter at the SDS Pod, at Sat Down South, at TJ O'Gara, at Go Hard. Thanks, guys. Talk soon.